The wind had a way of telling stories on the frontier, and that evening it howled like it carried secrets meant only for those who still listened, which was why Eli Carter slowed his horse when he saw the figure collapse near the edge of the trail, a lone shape half buried in dust and shadow, the sun bleeding out behind the mesas and painting the world in copper and fire. Eli was a man shaped by loss and silence, a cowboy who had learned early that stopping for trouble often meant burying another memory in the hard soil. Yet something about the veiled beggar woman lying there pulled at him with a force he could not explain. She wore a dark travel-worn veil that hid her face, her clothes little more than rags, and her body looked fragile, as if one strong gust might scatter her into the desert itself. He dismounted slowly, hand resting near his holster out of habit rather than fear, and knelt beside her, noticing the way her fingers trembled, the shallow rise and fall of her chest, and the strange dignity in how she clutched the edge of her veil even in unconsciousness. Eli gave her water first, tipping the canteen carefully, murmuring words he hadn't spoken to another soul in years, and when her eyes fluttered open, dark, sharp and startlingly, aware he felt as though he'd stepped into a story already, written long before he arrived. She spoke little, her voice hoarse and cautious, asking only for shelter and offering nothing in return. But a quiet God sees kindness, which unsettled him more than threats ever could. Against his better judgment, he lifted her gently onto his horse and rode toward his isolated cabin, the desert, stretching endlessly around them like a witness that never forgot. That night, as the fire cracked and shadows danced on the wooden walls, Eli noticed things that didn't fit the image of a simple beggar. The way she sat with her back straight despite exhaustion, the way her hands, though dirty, were smooth and unscarred, the way she studied her surroundings, like someone measuring danger. Rather than fearing it, she refused to remove her veil even to eat, and when Eli offered her a blanket, she thanked him with a gravity that felt heavier than gratitude. Sleep came uneasy for him, filled with dreams of the past he had buried, of blood-red sunsets, a woman crying out his name, and a child's laughter swallowed by gunfire. Before dawn, he woke to the sound of soft prayer, whispered in a language he did not recognize, and for the first time in years, Eli Carter felt fear not of death, but of truth. If you're feeling the tension building already, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because this story is only beginning, and what Eli is about to discover will change everything. Morning light revealed more than Eli was ready to face, because when the veiled woman finally lowered the cloth from her face, the desert itself seemed to hold its breath, and Eli felt his body go cold, frozen not by fear alone, but by recognition so deep it shook the foundations of who he believed himself to be. The woman was older than he had expected, yet unmistakable. Her eyes carried the same fire he had once loved, the same sorrow he had sworn never to remember again, and in that instant the years collapsed, and Eli was no longer a lonely cowboy, but a man standing at the crossroads of his past. She was Mara, the woman he had believed dead, the woman whose disappearance, after the massacre, had haunted his nights and driven him into a life of wandering and self-punishment. But she was more than that now. She was a symbol whispered about in border towns and hidden camps, a woman who had survived betrayal, war, and exile, moving through the land disguised as a beggar to escape those who would kill her for what she knew and who she had become. Her veil had not been for shame but for protection, and the rags she wore were armor in a world that devoured powerful women. As she spoke, revealing how she had watched from the shadows as Eli rode away years ago believing her lost, he felt guilt crush him heavier than any saddle. She told him of the child he never knew lived, of sacrifices made in silence, of enemies still searching, and of how fate or God had led her to collapse on the very road he would ride. Eli listened, unable to move, realizing that the kindness he offered a stranger was the final test of the man he had become. When riders appeared on the horizon by midday, armed and relentless, Eli did not hesitate. He stood between them and the woman he once loved, choosing at last not to run from his past but to defend it. The gunfight that followed was brutal and brief, dust and echoes swallowing violence as they always had. But when silence returned, Eli was still standing, wounded yet unbroken. Mara took his hand then, no longer a beggar, no longer veiled, And in her eyes he saw forgiveness not as a gift he deserved, but as a chance to finally live. Together they rode away from the cabin, toward a future uncertain yet honest, proving that sometimes the greatest revelations come disguised in rags on a lonely road. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that kindness can rewrite destiny, make sure to subscribe to the channel, because more powerful, soul-stirring stories like this are coming, and you won't want to miss a single one.